Going to be making rims for a Volkswagen Jetta. Reason being is that's the vehicle that I drive, so I know the dimensions on it. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is you're going to be creating a wheel with the parameters of the lug patterns is going to be on a 100mm circle, and there's going to be 5 lug bolts, which you'll see when we start designing all this stuff, and the center bore is 50mm with the offset of 57.1mm, which you'll see when we start designing this. Okay, now if you take a look at what I have on my screen right here, it's basically a solid wheel. Okay, and if you think about it, if you ever watch those Orange County Chopper shows or any shows like that, they quite often start with a chunk or a solid billet wheel, and then they go and remove material to produce their finished wheel. So they'll machine it or mill it, whatever it might be. So the first step we need to do is come to how we create this solid wheel. If you take a look over my feature design tree, you'll notice that it's done with one simple revolve. Okay, so if it's done with one simple revolve, we know that this is created with one sketch. So if I open my revolve and take a look at my sketch, you'll see this containing sketch of how this is produced. All right, so there's a few dimensions here that we need to look at. Number one, if we look at the radius of this rim, let me see if I go to the right side here. If we look at the radius of this rim, I know that it's 9 inches. Okay, so this would be an 18-inch wheel. We'd take that radius and double it. This would be an 18-inch rim. The parameters that you have for your design constraints, which I'll pass out the sheets in a minute, is between 15 and 20 inches in diameter. All right, if you build it any larger, it's not going to fit the vehicle. So if you say, 11 inches here as a radius, you're going to have a 22-inch wheel, which isn't going to fit the vehicle, does not fit the design constraints. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a new sketch, and I'll show you how this sketch is created. So I'll create a new part, and on my right plane, I'm going to square up to that right plane, and we're going to create this sketch. All right, just to give you guys an idea of what this sketch looks like and how easy it is to produce this solid wheel. This will be the first part that we go through, and then after everyone creates their solid wheel, I'll show you how to start removing material and start patterning that material so that you're not sketching 5 different entities for your spokes or whatever you decide to do. Okay, so there's a couple dimensions that become very almost all the dimensions actually become very specific in this. If you do not follow certain criteria, your wheel will not fit the vehicle. All right. In other words, if we make a vehicle or make a rim that is 10 inches wide, it's probably not going to fit the vehicle. All right. So in this particular case, I'm going to be working under the concept that this is 8-inch wide wheel. So I'll do 4 inches and 4 inches, and I don't know why this line won't let me smart dimension it. So let's just make this one 8, and we'll work in this direction. Okay, so we have 8 inches here. That tells me that the center of this is at 4, so I'll draw a straight vertical center line so I just know where I'm working at. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do is offset some entities. All right, and I'm going to offset these to 0.4 or 4/10 of an inch, and I'm going to take those up like this and get these closed. I'm also going to extend this sketch, and that's going to serve for my little lip for where the tire falls in. So if you think about a tire bead where it would fall in, it's basically going to fall in right here, and that's going to help hold this. I recommend throwing dimensions on everything, even if you just keep it where it lies. Reason being is when you start dimensioning other items, if you don't have those little dimensions in there, it's going to start skewing up your whole drawing. Okay, so I'll get this drawn, and if you take a look, I have to trim up this entity. Trimming in SolidWorks is a little different if you haven't used it yet. If you select trim entities, we have a couple options available to us. Power trim's my favorite. All right, all you're doing is clicking and dragging. All right, so there's no selecting like in Mastercam where you have to select the entity you're keeping. You simply just drag over what you want to delete. So it's really nice. All right, let's go over and duplicate the same on this side. And I'm coming down 1 inch. Let's see if that's what that was. 1 inch, good. All right, I'm going to come over 0.45. And these dimensions are all specific to the design brief. So when you get the design brief, double check to make sure that the dimensions that you have are correct. Interesting. So let's get this trimmed up. Power trim. Good. All right. And what I'm going to do from here off this center line that I have created here is I'm going to create a line that is horizontal with a value of 1 inch. All right, so you can get that dimension to 1 inch. I'm going to set a constraint that it's horizontal, which you already see here. All right, and I'll bring this line down at a specified angle, which we'll specify in a second. And I'll bring another line down, and I want to keep these lines parallel. So you can either use the built-in constraints, or I can select a constraint after I draw it. So if I draw it, I can go ahead and say this line, hold shift, select this line, and set those to parallel so that they won't come apart at all. All right. I'll trim up this center section, and let's add a little strength to this wheel with a back angle like this. Now, this design right in here determines what your wheel is going to look like. All right, so if I decide to change this, which we'll come back to, let me come back to that in a second, but we can actually change that to determine what the design of our wheel looks like. Sometimes wheels almost have like Z cross sections where they come out and then they come back in. This is where that would be done. All right, and let's get this smart dimensioned, and this determines the overall height of our wheel. So right now we have 10-inch rims. All right, not going to do anyone any good, and it's probably not going to win any competitions on beauty. All right, so let's get 18s. So I would enter that 9 inches here, which I'm having some difficulty entering. Let's see if this works. All right, there's 9 inches, and you see how it automatically changes these other items. So you see why you want to get your smart dimensions in to kind of lock that in place. I'm just going to get this extended and redraw my angle, my support angle here. Trim that up. All right, so we have the basic shape of our cross section of our wheel. If I finish my sketch, you guys can kind of see what this looks like. And you can imagine if we revolve this 360 degrees, what we're going to be left with. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select my features, revolve, and I'm going to select this face. My axis of revolution is going to become this line. All right, and this gets spun 360 degrees. So if I check that off, what you see is your cross section still held there, but what you're left with is a solid wheel. Okay, so you guys see if we, let me pull a cross section here, a section view, and we'll come from this side. There's the design of my wheel, or the cross section of my wheel. So you see how this is coming in? That's driven off that line I spoke about earlier. If I decide to come out and then back in, almost like a Z cross section, that would be done under this sketch. So let's go back and modify that sketch quickly. Delete my revolve. I'm going to edit my sketch, and I'll normal to it. And let's quickly modify this to see what we can end up with. So I'm going to take this line, and let's get my smart dimension out of the way. Let's take this line and modify this slightly. Take the line tool. We'll come out and then back in. All right. Not really sure what this is going to look like. But you guys will get the idea. I'm going to parallel it here. And let's trim this up. Okay. Now let's go ahead and revolve this. Same procedure. Axis of revolution right there. And now you see my cross section is a little different. All right. So by changing that revolve feature, you can change how this rim is going to function as a solid unit. From this point, once you have this design done, it's as simple as really selecting a plane to sketch on, sketching some parameters, and then really just drawing what you want to remove from this wheel. So I don't know what you guys are into, but let's say we want to mirror this about this line I just drew. Let's say I want to extrude cut that. I'm going to take that through my entire wheel. Come on. All right. That gives me one space that's removed. If I pattern that with a circular pattern under my features, so my pattern axis is going to be this, and I want to have equal spacing, and let's say we want 10 of those. You're left with a simple wheel design. Obviously not the most interesting wheel, but you guys get the idea. Now, all your specific parameters for lug spacing and so forth need to fall within this. Okay? So ultimately, that's the start of this project. I'll save this so we can make some additional videos a little later down the road and show you how to go about doing that. But that's the start of where we're going to begin our rim project.